First of all, what are employers likely to see from SB 553? There's really several components of it. Number one is developing the plan itself. And there is a model template that Cal OSHA has put out that really will provide assistance to employers in filling out and completing this plan. The second one, which I think is probably the most important thing, is rolling it out to all employees through a training program, making sure that all your employees that are working out of the state of California are trained on the program itself. And this training must be completed annually. So it needs to be something that an employer can easily push out each year. The other couple things that are really important about this bill is the requirement to have very sort of robust record keeping procedures, as well as a violent incident log documentation process. So there is requirements for employers to follow those requirements when it comes to keeping records, whether it's training records, violent incident logs. They need to have that process in place. And then the last thing I really want to highlight is the need for a threat assessment process. So if an employer receives information about a workplace violence threat or hazard, that there is a process in place to assess the threat and then assign response actions according to their assessment. So this is really the sort of the fifth big thing that I see that needs to be considered when complying with SB 553. As far as what do we see as, further, will this bill sort of spread out into other states? It's hard to tell right now. California is a trailblazer when it comes to protecting workers. However, being that the requirements of SB 553 really, in my opinion, are based on leading practices in workplace violence prevention, I see that there will be other states following suit. When this will happen, it's hard to say. But I think with the uptick in violence at the workplace, it could be sooner than later that other states follow suit. It's going to add another responsibility to their plate. But with that being said, I'm a strong believer in cross-functional representation, cross-functional internal team that can address workplace violence prevention in the program. So it would really be important for HR leaders to also look at bringing in other functions within their organization, such as legal, operations, could be risk, to be part of the broader team so that there is shared responsibility, but also provides that cross-organizational support for the program as a whole. So yes, there will be added impacts to HR, but again, looking at a broader team to manage this bill and the requirements that it has for organizations, I think is really important. HR leaders, but leaders overall, people should be an organization's number one asset and their number one priority. And as we have with all other types of emergencies, whether it's fires, earthquakes, tornadoes, hurricanes, chemical spills, we all know what to do. Employers all have plans and procedures and provided training for this. So this is just workplace violence is just another emergency situation that organizations need to prepare their people for. Because I would say if you don't have your people, it's really hard to operate as a company. So again, always keep reminding themselves that their people are the number one priority. Safety in the workplace should be also the number one priority. I think challenging is everybody getting it all done in time for July 1st. I think there's a lot of work going on in organizations that operate in California or have employees in California. But then after July 1st, I think could be the greatest challenge will just making sure that all employees are trained and trained annually. This also includes onboarding of new employees, but also if there's ever an identification of a workplace hazard and corrections are made, then there needs to be additional training so employees are aware of that. So keeping up with the training is going to be, it could be a challenge, but then I think looking at the different types of training, and how can you be effective in presenting this material, this information to your employees, whether it's through e-learning, which seems to be the most popular these days, but also understanding that not every organization is able to push out e-learning. And so making sure that you have the adequate training, whether you have an office site, whether you have a plant, warehouse, distribution site, whether you have field employees. I think that's really important. I think the record keeping process, if you already don't have a process in place for documentation, I think that could be challenging for some. So making sure that you have a robust record keeping process. And then lastly, making sure that that threat assessment process, that if you put together a team that's going to assess a threat that comes in, making sure that that process is followed. Because I think it's very easy sometimes to go back to what we're used to doing versus anything new. So making sure that organizations follow that threat assessment process so that they're able to quickly and effectively make a determination as to the credibility, and then if required, implement the appropriate actions. Number one, don't do it alone. Um, Identify a team that can support you, and pull from people outside of HR, relevant functions outside of HR to help. I always said it's always, there's no I in team. Develop also a simple, easy to implement plan. I think from my experience, having read through different types of plans of all shapes and sizes, if the plan is not easy to use and streamlined and easy to understand, it's not going to work. So making sure that you have a simple, easy to use, actionable plan. Think of the different ways that you can push out employee training. Think about the different ways that you can get employee engagement, because that is a big component of SB 553 is that employee engagement. And then look at training, which this is not included necessarily called out, but look at how you can train your managers and supervisors, your leaders, on what their role is in a workplace violence incident. So I would say, that list, don't do it alone. Develop a simple plan, consider effective ways to train, and look at additional training for leaders and managers. I think are great additional, a great advice I would like to provide this time.